Hey class, welcome to our Chapter 10 PowerPoint lecture about multiple murder, school, and workplace violence. Once again, just a reminder that this PowerPoint is only going to cover some of the things that are addressed in this chapter, so please do still make sure you read the chapter to get all of the important information from it. So, when we are thinking about this type of violence, one of the things that comes up is this idea of being able to profile and identify people who are at risk of perpetrating these acts before they do, to intervene. So, this has led to the field of investigative psychology, which is sort of a refining of the idea of profiling. There isn't any kind of regulation or requirement for somebody educationally or training wise to label themselves as a profiler. And so, what that has caused is it's caused a lot of lack of reliability and validity for, quote, profiling. So that has led to this term investigative psychology, which was coined by David Cantor, who was the director of the Center for Investigative Psychology at the University of Liverpool in England. And it refers to the application of psychological research and principles to the investigation of criminal behavior, and really trying to answer these three fundamental questions crucial in criminal investigations. So here are these three fundamental questions. What are the important behavioral features of the crime that may help identify and successfully prosecute the perpetrator? What inferences can be made about the characteristics offenders that may help identify them? Are there any other crimes that are likely to have been committed by the same person? These questions are central to this field of investigative psychology and are rapidly being addressed in the United States, Canada, Australia, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom's, idea is this is kind of a scientific approach to criminal investigation. And has helped with the plight to accumulate data about these certain types of, multiple murder, serial killers, school violence, workplace violence situations, and obviously in hopes to prevent them. So, psychological profiling is the identification and prediction of behavior in known individuals, and can really be broken down into these five categories. First is psychological profiling. Second is suspect-based profiling. Third is geographical profiling. Four is crime scene profiling. And five is equivocal death analysis. And when we're talking about psychological profiling, it's really an assessment practice that's designed to help in the identification and prediction of behavior in known individuals. So it's not just limited to identifying negative characteristics, but also positive characteristics. So that means psychological profiling can also be used to predict positive characteristics like candidates for law enforcement or public office, that sort of thing. So it's not only looking towards those negative characteristics of somebody who might be, apt to commit violence. Excuse me. Psychological profiling really consists of two basic approaches: threat assessment and risk assessment. Threat assessment, we covered in Chapter 8, is the process of determining the validity and seriousness of a threat being carried out by a person or a group of persons. Um, Most cases, the threat has already been made and is directed at a person, facility, institution, organization, or group of persons. An example might be a high school student who tells his peers that he's planning on perpetrating, some kind of mass shooting situation at the school. And then risk assessment is a process to evaluate individuals who have violated social norms or displayed bizarre behavior, particularly when they appear menacing or unpredictable. Again, the primary goal of risk assessment is to estimate the probability that a particular person will harm themselves or others. Suspect-based profiling is then also known as perspective profiling, and refers to identifying the psychological and behavioral features of persons who may commit a particular crime, such as school violence, terrorist attacks, stalking, drug trafficking, shoplifting, or skyjacking. Suspect-based profiling is built on the systematic collection of behavioral, personality, cognitive, and demographic data on the previous offenders who committed similar crimes. So, obviously, looking at crimes that have already been committed by certain people and then trying to figure out if there is a way to group those people into a suspect category so that there's a little bit of a checklist of warning factors. Suspect-based profiling, often used at airports and border crossings. As we all know, in the wake of September 11th events, they had behavioral detection officers in airports to observe air passengers for any kind of behavior clues. The downside of this type of profiling is that it can lead to racial or ethnic profiling, which is defined as police-initiated action that relies on the race, ethnicity, or national origin rather than the behavior of an individual or information that leads the police to a particular individual who's been identified. So, again, going back to the September 11th situation, that would be instead of keeping an eye out for that specific behavior that would be a warning sign, instead sort of lumping people into a racial or ethnic category of looking like they were from that region of the world and then therefore must be a threat. Racial profiling is illegal, and it is sometimes difficult to prove that it has occurred, but can probably be seen in the disproportionately high arrest statistics for people of different ethnic groups. Okay, then the next is geographical profiling, and this is a technique that can help locate where a serial offender resides or other geographical locations that serve as a base of operations of a serial offender. So, if there's a specific place that they are targeting their victims, this geographical profiling helps to kind of identify where those areas are, and then also, trying to obviously ideally find out maybe where this person might be geographically located so that they can be intercepted. There's a variety of different computer software programs that are utilized for geographical profiling. Those are listed there in your book. The Criminal Geographic Targeting Program uses a 3D map, kind of where the offender's territory is, and then the three-dimensional map is placed on a street or topographical map where the crimes have occurred, to try to, again, sort of locate where the person can be intercepted. Crime scene profiling, also called offender profiling, criminal profiling, crime scene analysis, or crime investigative analysis, is the process of identifying personality traits, behavioral patterns, geographic habits, cognitive tendencies, and demographic features of an unknown offender based on characteristics of the crime. So this would be, you know, when we think about, you know, kind of like what the crime scene actually looks like, right? And I'm sure we've all, you know, heard about or watched, you know, some kind of crime movie where the serial killer or the person perpetrating the violence, you know, does something specific to kind of leave a mark on the scene or take something of the victims. That all falls into this crime scene profiling. And then, of course, again, with the hope of trying to put together somewhat of a pattern that can be intercepted. 3 classifications of crime scene here: organized, disorganized, and mixed. As time has gone on and research has come out, those first 2, organized and disorganized, there's a lot of backlash about oversimplification of that dichotomy. Organized would be, you know, very well planned out. The person was able to stay in control during the perpetration of the crime. Disorganized would be the opposite, so more impulsive, things didn't go well, you know, obviously not super planned out. The research indicates that, you know, the vast majority of the time there are both organized and disorganized features of a crime scene present. So that last category, mixed, is the more recognized crime scene profiling. So when we're talking about flaws in the modern day system of crime scene profiling, one flaw is the assumption that human behavior is consistent across a variety of different situations. And the other flaw is the assumption that offense style or evidence gathered at the crime scene is directly related to specific personality characteristics. So psychology has consistently found that behavior varies according to situations or the social context, especially if the social contexts are significantly different. Moreover, there is little empirical data that link crime scene characteristics to personality or other psychological features of the offender. Okay, equivocal death analysis is also called reconstructive psychological evaluation, and this is the reconstruction of the emotional life, behavioral patterns, and cognitive features of a deceased person. So this is usually a post-mortem psychological analysis, and so is then also referred to as a psychological autopsy. Really relevant in the case of single murders, if there's a question about whether an individual committed suicide or was murdered. And the reliability and validity of this type of analysis really open for debate. It really, you know, depends that the validity and reliability of this type of analysis really depends largely on the training, knowledge, experience, and clinical orientation of the investigator. So it can be very heavily influenced by that. Okay, so then we're going to get into what this chapter is really going to focus on more is kind of this concept of multiple murders. Okay, so when we're talking about these multiple murder scenarios, breaking it down into 3 different categories, serial murder is usually reserved for incidents in which an individual or individuals kills a number of victims in separate events. Criminologists and other researchers have traditionally thought of the number of victims as three or more. However, in 2005, the FBI lowered the threshold and defined a serial killer as one who has killed two or more individuals in separate events. So that's the standard at this point in time. The time interval between serial murders is sometimes referred to as the cooling off period. Can be days or weeks, but it is more likely months or even years. Even this time interval raises questions like, is the person who kills someone at age 23, then two or more people at 45, a serial killer, right? Because of that sort of period of time in between. The cooling off period is really the main difference between serial murders and other multiple murders, but it is not clear cut. Serial killers, the murders are premeditated and planned, and the offender usually selects victims with specific characteristics such as age, certain hair color, or occupation. Next, we have a spree murder, which there is no cooling off period, and usually it is two or more locations. So it is usually, or sometimes it's used to refer to the killings of three or more individuals without any cooling off period, usually at two or more locations. So a bank robber who kills some individuals within the bank, flees with hostages, and kills a number of people while in flight during a statewide chase would be an example of a spree murderer. And then last is a mass murder. And this is a single location, no cooling off period. Mass murder is still relatively rare, occurring in less than 1% of the thousands of incidents of homicide committed every year. They have increased in the United States over the past 30 years. And this is often attributed to the widespread availability of guns, especially assault weapons. And various kinds of mass murders, those sponsored by some governmental authorities, such as genocide, terrorist mass murder, like what happened on September 11th, Oklahoma City bombing in 1995, those types of mass murder situations. Okay, so now we move on to talking more about serial murders. So it is believed that the number of serial murders decreased in the United States over the years from 1970 to 2009. However, some have estimated that there are about 35 to 40 serial murders active at any given point in the United States. It's real difficult to estimate the annual number of serial killers and victims. This is because by the time serial killers are caught, it can be extremely difficult to establish a reliable count of victims. This can be because the person maybe over-reports, right? Kind of makes it seem like they killed more people than they did, or less. And then also how many of those murders these serial killers can actually be charged with. Choice of victims for serial killers. You'll remember that when we were talking about more of the single incident homicide and violence, it was really such a high prevalence of people that were connected, right? Like somebody that they knew, interpersonal violence, domestic violence, that sort of thing. Serial killers tend to be the opposite, at least male serial killers. So when they are identifying victims, there are these different things that we're looking at. So availability just refers to the lifestyle of the victim or the circumstances in which the victim is involved. So when you think about a serial killer trying not to get caught, looking for somebody who is living some kind of life where there's a high probability that they would go missing, like a sex worker or that sort of thing. That would be a very available target and also a vulnerable target. Um, and then also desirability of the victim. So desirability refers to the appeal of the victim to the offender. Could involve characteristics such as race, gender, ethnicity, age, occupation, hair color, or sexual appeal. Um, and this is a good time to also emphasize that most serial killers, noted that most serial killings are um, not sexually motivated. So that's a good thing to just acknowledge. And then again, covering the fact that a lot of single victim offenders is family or acquaintances, and then with serial murders, it's really strangers that they are targeting. So difference there. Most serial killers have specific preferences for the location of their killings. They frequently commit their crimes within comfort zones that are often defined by an anchor point, such as their residence, employment, or the residence of a relative. Very few serial murderers travel interstate to kill. Those that do travel interstate for their murders are often truck drivers, those in military service, transients, or internment individuals who move from place to place. 14 estimates that 14% use their home or workplace, and another 52% commit their murders in the same general location or region, such as in the same neighborhood or city. So, because of that, the geographical profiling could be a very invaluable tool in identification of serial killers. Rossmo in 1997 developed a typology based on the modus operandi of serial killers and serial rapists. He identified 4 specific hunting patterns. The first, this is the hunter, the poacher, the troller, and the trapper. Hunters are those criminals who specifically set out from their residence to look for victims, searching through the area in their awareness space that they believe contain suitable targets. Hunters are geographically stable in their crimes, usually occur near the offender's residence and neighborhood. Poachers are more transient, traveling from their neighborhood in search of suitable victims. The troller does not necessarily search for victims, but depends on random encounters during the course of other activities. And the trapper creates situations to entice victims to come to him. All right, so risk factors and psychological motives. So, of course, we would all like to know what motivates somebody to become a serial killer. And unfortunately, there is not a single identifiable causal factor. There is usually a desire for media attention. Very important to note, they are not necessarily mentally disordered or socially inept. As a matter of fact, they are usually people who are carrying on what appears to be a normal life. Married, have children. There's an example in your textbook of somebody who was a Boy Scout leader. Another example of somebody who is, highly regarded in their church. So, this idea that these people are all kind of like weirdos and, isolated and all that sort of thing, that's actually not true, which of course only makes it more confusing for what does cause somebody to commit these crimes. Female serial killers differ from males in that they do actually are not choosing necessarily the random strangers, but they are usually husbands, former husbands, suitors, children, and elderly. The motive for female serial killers is material or monetary gain, usually involves poison or a pill overdose. And also, usually female serial killers have a longer span of time that they are out committing crimes before they are caught, opposed to their male counterparts. Um, Healthcare worker killings also are part of female serial killers. So this would be nurses, and there's actually some research that suggests that as many as 17% of female serial killers are nurses. So that's interesting. And, you know, motivation for healthcare worker killings include recognition, attention, revenge, power, and control. Some of these healthcare workers admitted that their killings relieved tension, stress, and frustration. Okay, so mass murders. Surprisingly little research has been directed at mass murderers, especially in comparison with the attention directed at serial murderers. And again, maybe this speaks to what I was just talking about, sort of the mystery and intrigue of serial killers, and that question of, you know, what makes somebody fall into that, and how do you identify those people, right? So mass murder is awful and alarming, and there is not that sort of mystery and intrigue necessarily. Mass murders, we're going to talk about these two different types. Classic mass murder is when an individual walks into or barricades himself into a public building like a fast food restaurant or something and kills at random. These also can be referred to as public mass murders, and they, you know, occur almost invariably with firearms, so always with guns. And then we have family mass murder, where there's at least 3 family members are killed by another family member, and very often the perpetrator commits suicide. So if you look at page 350 in your text, you will find this table. This is mass shootings in the United States from 1999 to 2019. So you'll see that it includes school shootings as well as other mass shootings. Okay, public mass shootings, all referred to as an active shooter situation, takes place in public circumstances like a school, workplace, mall, restaurant, parking places, and public transit. Again, confusing. Most perpetrators do not have criminal history. Often, or often to all the time, the crime is carefully planned, and usually the perpetrator, excuse me, plans to die in the shooting, which is certainly true when we think about school shooters. So active shootings or threats of mass shootings are on the rise. The government identified 160 shootings from 2000 through 2013, which is an average of 16.4 active shooter incidents a year. Between 2000 and 2006, there was an average of 6.4 a year, so that's quite an increase. Most of these incidents were in business locations such as malls, offices, or movie theaters. And then educational institutions and government locations followed next in line. The 160 shootings resulted in 486 people being killed and 557 being wounded. And in 2019 alone, there were at least 21 mass shootings in the United States. During 2014 and 2015, there were 50 active shooter incidents in 21 states, resulting in 943 casualties, 221 killed, and 722 wounded. All 50 shooters were male, 3 wore body armor, and 13 committed suicide at the scene. Now, when you look at these numbers, it does seem alarming. And then also, as the book mentions, when you look at the actual number of statistics and how many people are killed by firearms every year, just in the year 2017 alone, 10,982 persons in the United States were killed by firearms. So, yes, awful and alarming and terrible. And also, when you zoom out, a small percentage of the violence in the United States are actually these mass shootings. So again, really hard to create a profile for mass shooters. So partly because they can be so different. So during the years of 2016 and 2017, ages of shooters ranged from 14 years to 66 years. 7 shooters were in their teens, 18 were in their 20s, 9 were in their 30s, 9 were in their 40s, 3 were in their 50s, and 4 were in their 60s. So, there's really not like a clear way to profile. There does appear to be, though, a typology associated with mass murder, and these different categories for motivation. So the first is revenge. Revenge either against specific individuals or specific groups. Usually the killer seeks to get even with a group of people he dislikes. This can, an example can be that somebody's mad or was, cheated on by their girlfriend, and so they, open fire on a group of young women or something like that. So oftentimes victims are not necessarily just the target, right, but kind of caught up in that revenge scenario. The second type is the killer who seeks power and domination. They really enjoy and crave the fear they engender and the immense control they have over their victims. Usually the need for revenge and power go together. The power killer is seeking both revenge and control over his tormentors. So the thirst for power and control inspire this type of mass murderer to dress in military fatigues and combat gear and carry assault weapons packed with considerable firepower. The third type is loyalty, so usually based on a desire to save their loved ones from misery and hardship. Many family massacres, which are not discussed in this chapter, stem from this motivation. So this would be like a father who's in despair over the family unit breaking up, murdering his children and himself and sometimes his wife to try to spare his children the suffering. The fourth motivation for mass murder is profit. And the intention in this murder is to eliminate victims and witnesses to a crime such as a robbery. And that's also, including kind of sending a message out to other people about what could happen to them if they report the crime. And then the fifth and final motivation is terror. In this situation, the perpetrator wants to send a message through a horrific murderous rampage. This is a motive for the terrorist murders to be covered in the following chapter, so we're not going to talk too much about that here, but just know that that's coming up in the next chapter. Okay, school violence. So, the thing about school violence in the United States is that it occurs here more than if you combine all of the other countries in the world. If you combined their incidents of school violence, it happens more here than all of that, which I think is pretty profound. Um, and devastating. So school shooters, there does seem to be some kind of profiling available to that, and I should also clarify right now: school violence is more than just school shooting. So it's aggravated and simple assault, sexual assault, and robbery. Um, Warning flags, or I don't know, warning flags is the right term. Profiling for school shooters. There are some things. So, peer rejection, social rejection, cruelty to animals, fascination with weapons, and I'm not talking like somebody who loves their Nerf guns. I'm talking about some kind of, you know, um, overly interested, overly fascinated with weapons. And very interesting, very often their violent intentions were made known ahead of time. So, also incredibly important to take note of, right? That um, usually the school shooter kid is is telling somebody what their plan is, and whether or not that person takes it seriously can be, you know, a huge difference in how things turn out. So, cruelty to animals. This is not always present, and in fact, sometimes can be the opposite, where the school shooter is more empathetic to animals than they are to people. But in the instance when it is their cruelty to animals, specifically sort of targeting animals that are valued by society and the family, so it would be like pets, dogs and cats. Um, Also, peer rejection, social rejection. Interestingly enough, it's not necessarily that these kids don't have any kind of connection, but it's more so that they have been rejected and bullied and made fun of, and then have sort of found a friend or a group of people who they can identify with, and who kind of probably bolsters up this idea of getting revenge. So here you have on page 360 in your textbook descriptive characteristics of school shooters, primarily white and male. History of mental illness or disciplinary problems are not common, although symptoms of depression and suicidality are not unusual. Remember that with school shooters, they're always trying to commit suicide after they perpetrate the violence. Whether or not they succeed depends on the timing of the interference of the law enforcement, but that's in the plan. Average or above average intelligence, not failing in school, reside in rural towns and suburbs, intense and unusual interest in and easy access to guns, middle class family. Typically, they carry out this killing alone. At times, they have victimized family members before shooting, and have signaled intention to other students. Okay, workplace violence. So, workplace violence is different than workplace aggression. Workplace aggression is a term for conduct, usually on the part of the employees, that qualifies as emotional harm or minor physical harm to other employees. This is a distinction from workplace violence, which is aggressive actions, including death, that occur at the workplace, not necessarily caused by those who work within the organization. Um, Persons who are working in law enforcement and security occupations are usually believed to have the highest annual average rate of workplace violence among government and private sector employees. In 2015, OSHA also reported that health and social service workers are even more vulnerable to such violence. And women are the most highly susceptible to homicide in the workplace setting. Again, workplace violence, part of the determination there is causing serious physical harm. There are 4 types of categories of workplace violence. Criminal intent is the first, and this is when the offender has no legitimate relationship to the workplace or the victim and usually enters the workplace to commit a criminal action, such as robbery or theft. Type 2, customer-client patience. This offender is the recipient of some service provided by the victim or workplace and may be either a current or former client, patient, student, customer, or inmate or person under correctional supervision. Type 3 is a coworker. This person has employment-related involvement with the workplace, and the act of violence is usually committed by a current or former employee, supervisor, or manager who has a dispute with another employee of the workplace. This is sort of the disgruntled employee type. And then type 4, personal. This offender has an indirect involvement with the workplace because of a relationship with an employee. The offender may be a current or former spouse or partner, someone who is in a dating relationship with the employee, or a relative or friend. So type 3, the disgruntled employee, are often the perpetrators here, and often these folks lack social support, have been fired or let go from their position, and or feels mistreated. And so in response to this, some organizations have now taken it upon themselves to hire threat assessment teams to help curb any kind of potential workplace violence. All right, that is our lecture for this week, and I hope you all are having a great week and just looking ahead to Chapter 11, in which we are going to be talking about psychology of modern terrorism. Take care, you guys, and I will talk at you again soon.